What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Tonight in Haddonfield, and we got the beginning of several probably pretty big episodes, pretty important episodes for us moving forward. Welcome back to the show. Hopefully my audio is a little better now. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime. Him and I have been talking the last couple of days about some of this stuff, and we'll get into how we're going to do it and why we're doing it a certain way soon. But pretty big episode if you're a fan of Halloween, and pretty big episode if you're a fan of Elm Street. Without further ado, the master of show and tell himself, Mr. Dean Renner. What's going on, buddy?
A lot of stuff to get into. Like you mentioned, Elm Street. A few other things we're going to get into about the Halloween series. Pretty deep dive review on Retribution, which I have to admit was a fun listen and a pretty good read when I went in and typed up notes and went back to fine tune some details on that stuff. So a lot to get into, and I think we got some good details for everybody tonight.
Yeah, so this is the way the show is going to work. Is we are going to do Elm Street right off the top and what might be happening with that franchise. And then Dean's going to come in with show and tell. And then the rest of the episode is going to be the Halloween TV series and the Halloween Lost sequel, Halloween Retribution. And Retribution will also be broken up into parts. Part one will be tonight, and we'll cover it more next week. So if you're trying to avoid potential spoilers for anything that's definitely there's room to I was reading a message from Dean and then I just started saying his garbage. There's a lot to talk about tonight, and you all can be the ones that determine how much you believe and how much you not or don't, because Dean and I ourselves had to look at the information, and we trust where it's coming from. There's no reason not to, but we'll dive into that in a bit. And let's start off with Elm Street, man. You brought it to my attention. I had heard some rumblings about it too. I think everyone now has kind of heard some rumblings about it. Yeah. But it seems like the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise may in fact be coming back to life.
That it is. There's a recent article from the Hollywood Reporter with Lee Cronin. If anyone does not know who Lee Cronin is, he's one of the more recent, I believe, directors and creators of Evil Dead Rise. So between him, Jason Blum, and James Wan, and I believe most potentially New Line Cinema, they kind of all have put their minds together on a new project that we could see by 2026. If you read through the article, there are certain kind of trigger words and little breadcrumbs that if you start putting the pieces together, it kind of hints at and points at what could be a new Nightmare on Elm Street film. So Sean and I had mentioned here a few months back, I believe, that something for Elm Street may have been in the works, possibly to come out by next year. I think that's, at this point, probably a little early. 2026 sounds a little bit more realistic. So, putting the pieces together from this article, like I said, it kind of leans more towards Elm Street coming out possibly 2026.
So to recap, I didn't hear all that because I was adjusting my audio. But it sounds like all signs are pointing towards, and this is based off of a Hollywood Reporter article, that Blumhouse and New Line would be doing a joint project, and that project, which was not revealed, is believed by a lot of people to be a brand new Elm Street film. Now, where it takes place, what's going to happen with it, who knows? I have mixed feelings about Blumhouse being involved. That being said, given the amount of money that WBD and Blumhouse put out, not WBD, Universal put out there, for The Exorcist and how that didn't go so well, and then spending even more money to bring Mike Flanagan in to attempt to not necessarily save what they've been doing, but save their financial deal anyways. I don't have a ton of faith in Blumhouse, especially after Halloween Ends, and I know that's subjective. Some people love Halloween Ends, and that's okay. But it makes a lot of sense that it'd be a joint project. Keeping in mind, hey, if you're doing a joint project, that's more chefs in the kitchen, more opportunity for, the stop sign to be put up, more opportunity for people to not be on the same page. And it's harder to get something not just greenlit, but actually released. Like, look at all the Halloween projects where you had the Weinsteins and the Accads at each other's throats. One later today that we'll be talking about, or later this show we'll be talking about. So I don't know. Look, Elm Street fans deserve a new film. And say what you want about Halloween Ends. I think Halloween Kills gets more hate than it deserves. And there's no questioning Halloween 2018 success. It's still probably the best modern day Halloween movie. And at the end of the day, they made $250 million plus worldwide. So it's not like they don't know how to rejuvenate a franchise, but I think you got to be careful how much money you spend. And story direction and casting is going to be big here as well. Dude, your faith in a New Line / Blumhouse Elm Street movie.
Yeah. Where to begin? So I kind of like the fact it's staying with New Line. They're kind of the originators of this franchise, so it's kind of good to hear that it's probably staying with them. There is going to be a lot of hands in the mixing bowl when it comes to this, because it was the Craven estate that was involved. They held the rights. New Line also has their hands in the rights as well. And then you've got a new joint venture between Jason Blum and James Wan. So they're coming together on Atomic Monster. That's going to be their new production company. And then they want to bring in Lee Cronin, who is coming off of Evil Dead Rise. So that's, at least, 5 names that we know of that are going to be potentially involved with whatever this is. I will hint, or I will mention that the article does say it's a mysterious project at the moment. Some of the little kind of hints within the article were like, this new project is going to leave people with nightmares. And they have a pretty good idea for an ancient, I don't know if they said franchise, but whatever it was, it kind of hints towards an IP that already exists. So like I mentioned, there's a couple of little hints throughout the article that just kind of, got some people's wheels spinning, and they started putting it all together. And the majority vote has been it's probably Nightmare. Blumhouse has wanted to get their hands on every major horror franchise that they can. We've seen it with Halloween. They took a shot at The Exorcist, and I know that they went after, I think, Texas Chainsaw at one point. I think they want Friday. So they really want to get their hands on all of the major franchises that we've known from the 80s. I think the potential is there, but with all of these kind of minds coming together to put this thing in motion, it could get a little hectic. And, this is going to be really dependent on, like you mentioned, story direction and what they want to do with it. So, fingers crossed as always for a good project, but with all these people involved, we'll kind of see how it happens.
Yeah, it's definitely better if you have everybody coming from the same place. It makes things easier. Question is, what do all of you think about the potential of a Blumhouse New Line Friday the 13th? Sorry, Friday the 13th fans. That was not intentional. Because God knows you've been, wearing it hard lately. Elm Street fans, your thoughts on a potential New Line Blumhouse movie that sounds like it's going forward, sounds like it's a couple years away, which is a good thing. Take your time. Don't screw this thing up. Let us know in the comment section down below or in the live chat. We would love to hear your thoughts and bring them up on air. Our buddy Wayne, longtime contributor to the show, Elm Street needs to bring back Nancy and have her be alive by saying that her funeral in Elm Street 3 was part of Neil's dream and she's still very much alive. See what happens there. Blumhouse is the franchise killer. No thanks, says Kevin. I'm kind of with you, man. The fact that New Line's still involved, I think, gives me some hope. It means Blumhouse can't run wild with just whatever the hell they want to do. And at the end of the day, as much as none of us want to admit it, the financial success of a movie is more important than the creative success of a movie. And at the end of the day, if they're able to, make a lot of money off this thing, it has a chance to help revive that brand. Obviously, it doesn't struggle in pop culture in terms of merchandising or anything like that. But at the end of the day, hey, we haven't seen one in forever, kind of like Friday the 13th. And, I think Blumhouse, they didn't handle Halloween Ends properly. This is subjective. This is just my opinion. I'm not stating fact. Don't want anyone to get too angry. I don't think they handled Ends well at all. I haven't seen The Exorcist, but from everything I hear, did not handle that well at all. I think a lot of that blame lies on Universal's foot too, though. Blumhouse isn't the one that goes out and spends that much money on rights. That's a Universal decision to do that. So we'll see what happens. But it certainly sounds like it's going forward. At this point, I think it'd be more of a surprise if it's not Elm Street than if it were to be Elm Street. So let us know what you think, and we would love to hear your thoughts on that matter. Without further ado, though, we are going to get to some show and tell in just 1 second. Big thanks to our channel sponsors. Without you guys, we wouldn't be here. Really appreciate the support that you provide. Jesse from Storytime Spectacular, Ryan from Colleague Nation, Jason from Backtrack Cinema, and Matt and Chris. Really appreciate the support you guys offer. To our patrons, big thank you. And if you're watching the stream right now, you can really help us out. And I mean, it helps us a ton. Like, comment, subscribe, and set your notifications to all to keep up to date with our future content. And as we know, tonight is part 1 of the rumored details of the Halloween TV series, which will come up right after show and tell. But without any further, Dean, I have no idea what you have in store for us tonight. So feel free to take it away.
All right. So I too was in the same boat. I had no idea what I was going to do. New release weeks, the past like 2 or 3 weeks have been kind of light. I've gotten some decent stuff here and there, but I haven't gotten anything really all that big and too worthy of showing off anytime recently. So oddly enough, in our little impromptu conversation last week, we got into physical media and, sales and deals and where to shop. And the mention from Randy of like Prime Day deals came up. So I went in the back and I grabbed myself, a Scarface set. So I figured that was a brief showing last week. Let's bring that back tonight and let's go through that. So for anyone who missed it last week, $100 retail price, snag this on a $35 Prime Day deal. And it is the World Is Not Enough, or The World Is Yours, limited edition 4K set of Scarface. This here that came in the box is a PVC statue. I believe that's what warranted most of the retail price. So the statue itself is pretty nice, but for me, it's been living in this box just to keep it protected for about 2 or more years, for as long as I've had this. Outer box gets your Tony Montana logos and the the poster shot that we all know. So love the box, love the statue. I will eventually find a good home for that. But let's get into the 4K itself. So this is the 4K edition, 3-disc set, I believe. So let's pop this open, and I have 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, so 3-disc set. You've got Scarface on 4K. Let's pop out the digital code for a minute. Scarface on 4K, the Scarface Blu-ray, and then the Scarface 1932 original. So some very cool inclusions in this set. And as far as special features go, it has the 35th anniversary reunion. That was an all-new conversation with director Brian De Palma and actors Al Pacino, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Stephen Bauer from the Tribeca Film Festival. So they did a nice little roundtable panel to go back and discuss Scarface. And then in addition to that, we have the Scarface phenomenon, the world of Tony Montana, the rebirth, the acting, the creating, deleted scenes, Scarface the TV version. So the TV cut is included, I believe, in here. unless that's just a discussion about what needed to be cut to get this to television, and more. So a decent amount of special features on this. But like I said, the price point and that statue that it came with for me was too good of a deal for me to pass up on. So I had to go ahead and add this to my collection. This is a universal release. The sound mix on this is DTS-X, so it is similar to a Dolby Atmos. And yeah, I have not checked out Scarface from 32 yet. That's been in this for quite some time. But I'll put it on my to-do list, and that will be a first-time watch for me, hopefully in the near future. But yeah, a little bit short and sweet, but I did want to revisit that, and that is Scarface, The World Is Yours, limited edition on 4K from Universal. So great release for anybody that wants to add Scarface into their collections.
Loved the old style font that was on the original.
Oh yeah,
they very easily could have just slapped on same title and whatever, but noticeable.
Yeah, the old. Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, it's a nice little touch. Like I said, I've never watched the 32 Scarface, so I'd be curious to go back and see what that's like and how the modern remake was different.
All right, so without further ado, here we are, and it's time for part one of our discussion on these rumored Halloween TV series details. So I want to specify this right off the top. They're still very early in this process, and Dean and I have been talking about that for a while. And I know some people who have watched this channel in the past think that we don't know shit, and you're entitled to your opinion. And you know what? Hey, everything that we're about to talk about could end up being nothing. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that's the case. I believe the people that this information's coming from, they've served this channel super well over the last several years, and definitely appreciate them sharing the information they have shared. So what's going to happen is we're going to talk about it this week, and then we are going to do a video that goes up on our Legacy of Halloween channel, which will serve as another part. And then we're going to come back and talk about it 2 more times on our live show. And we got about 2 pages worth of information. So take it with a grain of salt. There's a reason why it's titled Rumored Halloween Series Details. I would love to sit here and say confirmed.
Yeah.
But until there's, several scripts and shootings about to begin, that would be foolish of me to do so. So take it for what you will. Hopefully this pans out. I have no reason to think it's not going to. The question is it going to be what any of you want? That remains to be seen. Dean, before we dive into some of the material, and I'll walk us through it, your just non-spoiler thoughts on everything you and I discussed, and some of it's stuff that we've brought up on the channel anyway. Right. But your non-spoiler thoughts on what you heard, positive, negative, hopeful that that's the direction they go. Where are you at?
Yeah. Most of it I would say is positive. There's a few things that came up that you and I, when we were talking about it, I kind of said that sounds like some stuff we've been talking about. So I liked what I've heard so far. It's a lot to uncover. That's why it's going to take us, up to 4 parts to get through. Strictly rumor, like Sean mentioned, we're kind of treating it delicately at the moment until maybe we can get further. I don't know about confirmation or anything anytime soon, but until we get a little more confident in what we're getting is when we'll kind of deep dive into more of it. But so far, positive. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to these discussions. And I would say it sounds so far like a direction that I would be interested in that they take this. So, like I said, looking forward to getting into it and seeing actually what pans out from this, because there's a few things that we mentioned and a whole bunch of other stuff that's kind of new information. So, whenever you're ready, let's do it. Oh, I believe you're muted.
We're going to dive into 3 or 4 of these points. And again, take them with a grain of salt. I feel pretty confident in the information, though. And let's start off with this. Some people are going to go out there and they're going to say, who's your source or whatever. That'd be stupid for us to say because it would get someone in trouble. And anybody out there who has the luxury of being able to talk to someone that's involved in any project, always make sure they're okay with you talking about stuff and don't throw them under the bus. That being said, people also say, hey, wait for Hollywood Reporter or Bloody Disgusting or whatever. And they're not wrong. Like, once those places start covering it, it's about as official as it gets. But a lot of these places that get information, much like the drop that Bloody Disgusting did earlier this year, it's not like they just get the information. They have the information for some time before they reveal it in 9 times out of 10. So with that being said, we heard that they were in some ways going back to the essence of the original movie. And now there was a debate whether it was going to be a remake, a retelling, a prequel that leads into it. And from everything that I understand, and now Dean as well, it sounds like the TV series events will continue on after after the original Halloween movie. Now, I know people might eye roll and go, oh, so it's just Halloween 2018 all over again. No, not at all. So I want to point this out. The original Halloween movie has never been modernized. Period. End of discussion. 2018 isn't it? And Rob Zombie's Halloween movie is not it. Rob Zombie decided to go a radically different route with his 2 movies, despite the back half of his movie being a lot like the original Halloween movie. It still isn't. It's a very different telling. It's a very different backstory. Now, it sounds like there's a debate whether this is going to be a period piece set in 1978, 1979, 1980, or if it's going to be a modernized version. So, like, still having basically the same events that happened in 1978 happen again, but in a more modern time. Hey, to shoot a series that you want to last multiple seasons and have the thing feel like 1978 or 79 or 80 or sometime in and around there is expensive in 2024. Not saying it's not worth it, but it's very expensive. So there's definitely how much would modern technology change the original Halloween story we know about? And the truth is, it would change it a little bit, maybe not a ton, but a little bit. So whether they modernize the story or it's a period piece, that is not information that we have. All we know is at some point that was being considered. Now, who in the chat here, who in our live chat knows about a little Halloween Lost sequel called Halloween Returns? We've talked about it on this channel. Several other YouTube channels have talked about Halloween Returns. Hopefully, you guys know what Halloween Returns is. If not, we have some cool videos that you can go back and find. A bunch of other content creators have cool videos on it too. One of the things that we were told is it's basically Halloween Returns reimagined. Halloween Returns 2.0. There are some major differences, but if you liked the concept of Halloween Returns, some familiar characters returning, then you're probably going to like the direction the Halloween TV series is heading. Let's not forget, it's not like they said, no, we don't want to make Halloween Returns. That wasn't the reason Halloween Returns didn't get made. Halloween Returns was very much a project that was going forward. We're not saying it's going to be right on the nose to Halloween Returns, but it sounds like it's an incredibly similar direction that it's very likely to include a lot of one Dr. Samuel Loomis. Dean, your thoughts on all that?
Yeah. We mentioned Loomis might be the focus a couple of weeks ago. I think we're going to stick with that because that's what it sounds like they want to do. And then bringing in any ideas from Returns on, in my opinion, is a great idea. I read that script. We talked about it here. I was high, very high on that product there. So that's a shame that didn't get made. But we also said on that show that I wouldn't rule out the potential ideas for anything from Returns coming back. So here's that chance. I would love for a multitude of that script to get incorporated into the series and have them follow along with that. Maybe add some changes, change directions here and there. But if they could keep it as close to Returns as possible, without kind of, stepping on toes and ripping directly from the Return script, I would be all for it. I would love to see, what they do with Loomis. Let's see what kind of role he plays, and let's see how they develop his story. Returns stepped outside the box a little bit, went outside of Haddonfield, took place in Russellville, and I think they crafted a really, really good story with Returns. So, being very hopeful that they kind of stick to that DNA and bring that to the TV series. I think they'll finally be able to make a majority of the fan base happy for the most part, because it had a lot of focus on Myers, and we do get classic Michael, yet you have this story development across the whole thing. So that's going to keep a series alive. You're going to get at least, a good 10 episode series that's going to tell a long story. And if they approach it smart, they leave the door open at the end a little bit. That gives them room to expand and go into season 2 and season 3 and so forth. So I think there's a lot of good ideas on the table, and I hope it's basically what develops and what we get as far as the series.
A couple other points to make here before we move on to a brief discussion on Halloween Retribution. More of just a tease, and we'll dive more into the heavy stuff next week as we're running short on time. But so again, some people might be like, well, they haven't even announced a showrunner yet, so how is any of this stuff legit? My retort to that would be this. Almost every single Halloween movie has had the main direction mapped out before they bring on showrunner, director, etc. To the project. Almost every single one. And that's just the way Trancas works. They decide on a story, and then they bring on people who would be interested in working on that story. So it's not uncommon. It's very common in terms of the way that they do business. On the Loomis side of things, as far as I know, there's been talk of him being a big part of it or him being a very minor part of it. I understand where there's fear in recasting the character, even though I get a huge kick out of Malcolm McDowell at H2, Rob Zombie's H2. The character was not received well. Donald Pleasance's big shoes to fill. But those shoes have to be filled if you want to, successfully have a story crafted with Loomis being a big part of it. There's definitely some Laurie Strode stuff to talk about, but we're going to save that for next week. So on next week's episode, we'll be diving into Laurie. We'll be diving into whether this is a grounded story or a supernatural-esque story, and some other things. So definitely tune into that. I think there's the potential here. I love the idea of Halloween Returns being essentially the DNA of Sizzle. The DNA of what they're going to do. So my suggestion would be, whether this pans out or not, take the time, go check out Taking Shape 2 by Harker Press, Dustin McNeil, Travis Mullins. Read the Halloween Returns portion or listen to it on Audible, and you'll have a better idea of what direction they're heading with this. I think it's a really positive direction.
Yeah.
Might not be what everybody wants, though. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Let's continue to move on here, Dean. Halloween Retribution, essentially H9 It was the project they turned to once they realized H25 was not going to happen. It's a sequel to Halloween Resurrection, but feels more like a sequel to Halloween H2O. Features characters like Freddy, aka Mr. Busta Rhymes, and one John Tate, aka Josh Hartnett. Your thoughts on the story? Because I got to tell you, for me, when I look at Zombies 2 movies, even when I go back and look at Resurrection, I sit here and go, it's a real shame that this movie wasn't made, because this movie was far better written and had more compelling story. But you made a good point off air. And what was that?
It's like you mentioned, it feels way more like a sequel to H2O. It on paper, it read, well, not technically on paper, but the audiobook, me reading it on paper is all the notes I took. But when I went back and read everything that I kind of took from the story, it was a great read. And it's, like you said, a damn shame that we didn't get that over Rob Zombie 1 and 2. And even Resurrection, they could have possibly scrapped Resurrection, although they bring back Freddy, and he's a pretty prominent character for a part of the story until his character is gone. We'll get into how and why that happens, but yeah, I think this would have been a way better direction to go instead of what we got with Rob Zombie 1 and 2. Say what you want about the first one, the back half it's a lot like the original 78, but like you mentioned earlier, a pretty wild direction change. And H2 is just batshit crazy. They get into psychic and all kinds of things that goes on in the mind of Myers. So it's a shame that this didn't kind of come to fruition, but we have a lot of details and things to discuss over the next 2-3 episodes that we do here. So I think it picked up at a great spot, and it leads into a good story.
What's your take? Obviously, we know friend of the show, Braden Timmons, is doing a series of Halloween fan films right now, which are heavily based around the John Tate character. But how open would you have been way back in early 2000s to, like, what was your appetite? It's easy to say, well, yeah, I'd love John Tate back now in 2024. But that character wasn't received the best in Halloween H2. I don't know if people remember that.
Yeah.
What was your appetite to see that character come back, if any, back then?
Comparing it back then, I feel like he wasn't that big of a deal in H2O. I mean, kind of, but that basically unfolds into, Laurie versus Michael, 20 years after 78. Character's a little annoying, but he's a teenager. He's 17. That plays a big part in H2O. I didn't really bother whether or not he would have came back. If he returned, sure. We didn't see him in Resurrection. I don't think he was really missed all that much. But when you get into this story that they wrote out for him, he's very prominent. We get another returning Halloween alumni who's very prominent. A few new characters. Freddie Harris returns, and his storyline is a bit brief, but he's basically riding the wave of what happened.
Very sort of cut you off. Very Loomis from Rob Zombie Halloween 2.
Yeah, that's exactly what I picked up on as it was kind of reading out. But yeah, I really wouldn't have cared if they brought him back or not. And then the story that they kind of built and then develop around him this time around, certainly I think worlds better than what we got in H2O.
For sure. Now, I don't want to say what the ending is. By the way, the ending would have been very, very difficult to shoot and very expensive.
Yeah.
But cinematically speaking, I think this is one of those endings that if they had pulled it off, and maybe this is a little hyperbole, maybe I'm over exaggerating, but but would have been right there with Halloween 4's ending, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good comparison. You do get this strange kind of what if moment. So, not to get into it too far, but something happens at the end that kind of make you question what will, what's going to happen here? Are they going to move forward with it, or what's going to happen with John Tate? So it's a little open ended, and they kind of leave it up to like the viewer, so you can kind of come to your own conclusion on it.
There's definitely a little bit of, in my opinion, there's a little bit of inspiration there from Halloween 4 and the potential of where that could have gone.
Oh yeah.
I just think Retribution's a really good story, and for a long time, people thought this movie was going to get made. You even had, the Acads coming out and say, "Hey, we're close to shooting." Sadly, that's something that's happened far too frequently. Definitely happened far too frequently with the Halloween franchise, where they open their mouths before they're ready, and then it bites them in the ass. So I really appreciate what they attempted here. We're going to dive into all the spoiler-filled discussion of this on the next episode. Other than that, though, any final thoughts? Anything else, like one particular thing that you want to bring up about that Retribution story that you either liked or did not like before we close out for the night?
I will say Smith's Grove. Smith's Grove plays a big part, and in the tail end of the audiobook, the narrator he makes a good point where he says Smith's Grove is really only seen in Halloween and Halloween 2, and it's brief. It's not really ever been explored, and this is a story that gets into exploring more Smith's Grove. Does it have a connection to Michael? What happened to him when he was in there? And, the state of where it's at in modern day. There's a couple of time jumps throughout the story. So it kind of starts pretty early and then jumps ahead. And then we get some flashbacks, and, it kind of bounces around in time periods a little bit, which I like that. It was cool to revisit a couple of moments throughout the story. And then, basically Smith's Grove plays a pretty big part. They revisit it. I think they kind of handled it pretty well. And, you find out a little bit about what went on when Michael was in there. And then, like I said, the state that the facility is in currently. And then a bulk of your story kind of takes place there. So I think it was really cool to bring Smith's Grove back and then do what they did with it. Because like the narrator had mentioned, wasn't anything that was really explored before.
Kevin says, I can't take any Halloween movie seriously with the Freddy character. Well, it probably makes you happy to know then they got rid of him fairly quickly in this version, unlike at age 25.
Yeah, he didn't stick around very long. Very Loomis-esque of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And they pretty much make short work of Freddy.
Amen to that. Jade brings up, shameless plug, don't forget to head on over to the Legacy of Westeros after this is done to talk about the House of the Dragon season premiere. If you are a fan of Westeros, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, we have another channel, the Legacy of Westeros, which I will grab the link for and post it in the chat. But last night, actually on this channel, we did what was supposed to be an immediate reaction review and a little shorter, but because of some tech issues, the episode ended up going longer, and it's an hour and a half episode available on the channel. If you're a fan of high production TV and love utilizing your 4K setup and surround sound, and like good storytelling and high production value, then you can probably get past, the fantasy elements that you may or may not like. But check it out. We have a video right now on this channel, and we're about to go live in about 10 or 12 minutes time with a full spoiler breakdown and a rest of the season preview for House of the Dragon season 2. So be on the lookout for that. Dean, do you have anything you want to plug?
Not at the moment, but coming up, I do have pre-orders in for physical media stuff. So show and tells will come back in a little bit lengthier fashion. That was kind of a little quick revisit on something I mentioned last week. So be on the lookout for upcoming show and tells. I got some really cool stuff coming in, and just really looking forward to finally really deep diving into the rest of Retribution and kind of, pulling all those details out and really unpacking that story.
Yeah, in the next episode, we are going to lead with Retribution. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to lead with Retribution. We'll take a break for show and tell, and we'll get to part 2 of the details for the Halloween TV series, which will dive into some Laurie Strode related stuff that some people might be really happy about, and others might be very pissed off about. We'll have to wait and see. Anyways, big thanks for coming out. It's really appreciated. And we'll see you next time on Tonight in Haddonfield.